Hello, I'm the Angry Spork, taking issue with X-Men. Oh, the humanity. Mutants dealt with their newfound normality in different ways, some finding it liberating, others more devastating. However, it seems that the field nullifying the X gene is going to start playing pinball with all DNA, so designed by the shadowy mastermind that manipulated the High Evolutionary's entire plot, Mr. Sinister. Uncanny X-Men number 380 has Wolverine apparently having been made of ceramic this entire time. We begin with the sight of the mutates as Hank McCoy narrates how they're suffering from thousands of millions of chromosomal patterns being explored at once, their DNA reconfiguring by the second to reach a perfect combination. That, however, is far from easy at best, since nature changes all the time, and Hank, having returned to the mansion with Iceman since last issue, goes on to explain to the rest of the X-Men that Genosha's human magistrates are taking advantage by trying to wipe everyone out. Beyond that, this worldwide tampering of evolution, speeding up something meant to be gradual for long term, means that every organism on the planet will, soon enough, endure the same treatment as the mutates. The X-Men all contribute to the same thought, that the High Evolutionary's original intent was to neutralize powers to balance things out for the sake of all life on Earth, but McCoy says that this turn of events is coming from the same source as their lack of powers, Wyndham's satellite array. After investigating him further, it was discovered that Herbert vigorously studied then uncharted genetic science at the same university as a man called Essex, whom they all recognize as Mr. Sinister. At least when they weren't out attending raging keggers and vandalizing rival fraternities. They could call the Avengers or the Fantastic Four, but Hank suggests they might have some other stuff going on, so why bother?
You're making one big mistake, Ghostbuster.
Besides, every living creature on Earth will be mutated by the end of the week, so it's up to the X-Men once again. You could at least call and ask. Johnny Storm can reschedule Poker Night, the Heroes for Hire can probably set up a payment plan for you, and the Avengers can get their shawarma to go. Fortunately, what they currently lack in superpowers, they more than make up for in alien tech, acquired thanks to their recent Skrull-related adventures. Still, at least give Tony Stark's office a ring just in case. On the evolutionary space station, Sinister tells a stasis-held Wyndham that he was always too focused on the subjects instead of the bigger experiment. After H.E. mutters something about suspecting his former teacher was hiding something, which feels unnecessarily convenient to try and save face for the character, Essex replies he didn't ask because he feared the answers, and since there aren't any defensive capabilities, the villain will have to use his old pupil's new men instead. Extrapolating from what he's already learned during his time as his alter ego, so he'll be prepared if S.H.I.E.L.D. or any lingering super people decide to take action on the whole rapidly mutating the planet thing. Herbert won't tell him how to evolve the new men he has on board, but the villain is okay with that. It'll take longer, but it's up his alley. And yet, no mention of when he decided to go sleeveless, or why he shaved his goatee. Out of everything, that is the most baffling mystery. You made it work, man. Using the name of her other foster mother, Irene Adler, Rogue is on the phone waiting to speak to Mystique, knowing that her confinement is shaking her after little more than a week. I have to assume they mean a week at that prison, because if the powers have been gone for more than several weeks, and she was arrested immediately after losing her powers, that's the only way the timeline actually works. Anyway, she tries telling Raven not to do anything since something's come up, and that's when the former shapeshifter loses it. Once again, the girl she raised has chosen her other family, and she's done with any further excuses, slamming the phone down to Rogue's dismay. Yeah, I know, there's a long-standing, complicated relationship here, but Rogue has nothing to feel bad about. She's trying to save the world, and Mystique is more concerned about saving herself from responsibility. As I mentioned in the last episode, yes, there's the mutant persecution angle, but as undeniable as that is, there's also the she done broke the law a lot angle, and one could argue if she wanted to do something for mutant equality, she'd be willing to stand trial and make sure to call out any iniquity in her treatment. But moving on. In the hangar, the other X-Men are prepping a vessel, knowing that if they succeed, they'll again be despised by a world they'll again save. But the High Evolutionary didn't seem to understand that they can't be cured of what they're meant to be by nature, so none of them should feel bad that they'll enjoy having their powers back. Kurt feels he took his abilities for granted, and Aurora misses her connection to the elements, making her life without them feel lifeless. Restoring the powers and making Sarah Marrow again might affect her budding relationship with Brad, who I don't know if they ever mention after this issue. I get that they're mentioning Marrow's personal growth without her powers, but Brad showed up in one panel in Part 2 from a distance with nothing going for him but alleged seeing who someone is on the inside. There was more to invest with Cassandra Cain's relationship with her ESL classmate in Redemption Road, and the fact that I can't remember the guy's name should say something about how well that went. Wolverine stumbles in from the shadows, reiterating what we were told last chapter about his poisoning and why he didn't want anyone going to Wyndham demanding things be changed back on his account. I wasn't about to run the risk of Rogue and Marrow ending up as untouchables again. Considering Prohibition hasn't been a thing for decades, I don't know how it happened in the first place. Plus, I hear Elliot Ness can be kind of a jerk.
I understood that reference.
Logan doesn't really mention where he's been, only saying he's kept an eye on the mansion just in case, and seeing an uptick in activity let him know something was brewing. So was he skulking out in the yard this whole time? What happened to settling things with Sabretooth? Or does the school have hidden cameras he was watching from afar? When informed of their mission, the old knucklehead says he's coming too. He's not going to let a little thing like dying keep him from tagging along. Although I will need someone to help me go to the bathroom. You might want to bring gloves. We have a brief visit to Genosha, with Lorna explaining the humans have taken their capital city, effectively locked down the island as they continue the purge, leaving her, Mags, Amelia Vogt, and Fabian Cortez as the only mutants left. Well, them and the ever-changing mutates. It's again suggested that the depowering effect has been going on for a week. Cortez thinks it was foolish to give their only transport to McCoy and Drake, and Magneto replies that not only should Fabian watch his currently depowered and therefore extra useless tongue, but that the X-Men will succeed or die trying. Speaking of, they're all suited up and rocketing into space. Yeesh, I know Wolvie is short, but it looks more like he's sunk into his chair like he's pouting or something. Kitty's feeling extra nauseous, and Hank, in his original costume, suggests that as mutants they were spared the ill effects of such high-speed travel, especially in a craft faster than anything found on Earth. Is he saying all mutants are better prepped against G-forces? Weird. Their conversation is observed by Mr. Sinister, however he hacked their comms, and he's delighted that he gets to compare their current abilities to their previously empowered states. The team acid cuts their way on board the station, marvel at the hardware a moment before following the generator conduits to the main reactors to shut down the array. As they move through the hallways, they realize all routes but one are blocked. As if we're being herded, like rats in a trap! I was going to say maze, Sarah. Either way, let's just pray that there'll be cheese. And there is! If by cheese you mean the Evolutionary's mutated animal minions. Hank tells the team not to hold back because they're nothing more or less than a highly evolved menagerie of predatory animals, all in the thrall of their creator. Oh yeah? Then why does that giant lizard have pants? He even has a designer belt buckle. Explain that to me. They begin battling, much to Sinister's enthusiasm at the prospect of more combat like it to soon befall the surviving species on Earth. It doesn't go great for our team since their weapons are largely ineffective and they're outnumbered. Logan claims to smell their pale and blue enemy, suggesting that where he is, so too are the controls. Makes sense enough, so he, Storm, and Kitty head off on their own while the team draws the foe's attention for a bit longer. As Essex revels in the planet becoming his own personal petri dish, the three ex-stragglers confront him, as was expected when they're attacked by a goop creature and a giant rat. Yikes, Master Splinter's been going crazy on that muscle milk. However, Wolvie seems to scare off the rodent and attacks Sinister directly. In turn, and with a distressed look on his face, like he really didn't want to mess with the guy, he fires some energy blasts, but Logan's still standing. Kitty reasons that his healing factor has kicked in, as has her phasing, and that wave of sickness when they flew beyond the satellites was actually the return of their powers. Sinister has a widen eye think of that moment, since he still has his powers on the station, and is distracted by Storm's weak lightning attack for the very wrecked Wolverine to destroy the command circuits. There's a big boom, which may be the strangest sound effect ever given the situation. Shilvoo!
Zork? What is Zork? I didn't say Zord.
Sounds like a weird slang term someone came up with for a comedy set a few hundred years in the future. The rest of the team arrive, the new men reverted to their normal states by the High Evolutionary, and in all the hubbub, Sinister escaped in the X-Men's alien shuttle.
Look, I know we said this was going to be a quick infiltration to save the world, but that doesn't mean we leave the keys in the ignition.
Herbie is aware of his culpability in all this, only able to apologize and transport them back to Earth. Kitty questions how he can be trusted for punishing mutants for being what nature made them, and Wyndham clarifies that Wolverine actually took out the console, keeping him in stasis, allowing him to destroy his life's work with the press of a gauntlet button. He specifies finish destroying it, as the damage had been done for years, whatever that's supposed to mean. Around the world, the X gene is being reactivated, as seen by Blob's wardrobe malfunction, Jean Grey suddenly psychic again. I'm assuming those in the background are her parents. Mystique escapes prison, posing as a guard and plotting revenge on those she trusted abandoning her, while Magneto makes short work of regaining Genosha's capital, and apparently freeing the captive mutants. Mutate transformations are in remission, and the magistrates are on the run. And kinda weird, the word bold here seems to have an O slipping out. Anyway, turns out it was Polaris using an image inducer, as the real Magnus' injuries aren't quite healed.
I imagine in the Marvel Universe, costume contests have strict no image inducer rules to keep things fair. They can apparently make a young woman sound like an old man.
And so the comic and the storyline ends on a splash page of the X-Men, back to their normal, smiling for the reader. Except for Rogue, oddly enough. Or are they posing for a picture and she drew the short straw and had to hold the camera?
So concludes this 3-part foray into the X-Men without powers. It's far from the worst story I've read, but it just felt very meh. The final product didn't match the story's potential.
For the most part, character interactions are decent, though they can sometimes get hammy with dialogue that work better in thought bubbles or narration than open speech. I also noticed that Marrow, whose dialogue was the same font as everyone else's for the most part, returned to being her usual jagged style when they were on the station, the first sign of their mutations on the rise again, and that's actually pretty cleverly subtle, though the mixture of narrator captions and characters' thoughts or speech bubbles throughout the story can feel a little bit clunky, and I think maybe it could have been balanced a little better.
And speaking of balance, while we see how some of our heroes and heroines deal with their loss in different ways, I feel there were some missed opportunities to show, not just tell, strong moments unique to this situation.
Some of the X-Men enjoy themselves, make the best of it, while others are more despondent. In Wolverine's case, he was dying, though somehow still omnipresent and willing to kick the bucket if it meant others could be happier. Not sure how he controls his claws without his powers, but back to the larger point, one of the mistakes it makes is having a lot of dialogue where it would have been nice to actually see, for example, Peter's artistic pursuits, apparently having a career, or Kitty's school life. We get only glimpses of characters that might have been nice to see them more often, get their insights or experiences. This affects all mutants, but the story seems to say, yeah, these people existed, and we'll show them losing their powers and getting them back, but we won't show how they deal with it. We see Cable get overtaken by the techno-organic virus, which was only held at bay by his telekinesis, and I guess we just assume that the virus took a nap or something for the 1 or more weeks the depowering was in effect. Or how Jean was meditating in the mountains, lost her abilities, and I guess he just hitchhiked to her parents' place. Did Fred Dukes actually donate the excess skin, or was he hiding it all under his clothes? And if so, what about when his girth came back for comedic effect? Look at Toad. He's known for being kicked around by everyone, but might have been interesting to see how he experienced life after becoming all man-pretty. Or what about Marrow, who just started a relationship with a guy who she claimed saw past appearances? Does he live up to that, or turn her away after Sarah's bone growths come back?
I admit it's been a while since I read the comics after this. Heck, I originally wrote this review for my first or second season, but I don't think Brad gets mentioned ever again, making him and what he could have meant for Sarah feel a little pointless.
Not to mention the X-Men are trained to control their powers, so that they can still blend into society and not use them brashly, accidentally, or fatally. This means they'd have to get through tough situations without their powers, even hand-to-hand combat. But maybe I'm extrapolating and Jubilee was never taught how to defend herself in that fashion. since the longtime X-gal and then member of Generation X is simply seen running away from a confrontation instead of trying to fight back. We get a page of a woman mourning the death of her daughter, who was too far beneath the water to save when she became depowered, and it makes sense that there would be some fatalities in this situation, but I can't say I care that much because I don't know who these characters are, and it's never resolved in this story. Maybe it is later, but I can't say that for sure. The High Evolutionary is never held to task for the deaths for which he is essentially responsible, and the story just ends with him realizing that he erred, and the X-Men smiling like it's all good.
I know it wasn't intentional, but it feels as if, so long as no one they personally knew died, it's no big deal, which is a poor lesson some people in real life have sadly subscribed to.
Though I think such casualties could have been greatly reduced, if not completely avoided, if Herbert were as smart as he thinks he is. If he was all about saving the most people, even at the cost of a relative few, then wouldn't it have made more sense to tell the world what was going on, so people could prepare themselves? Or at the very least, only give mutants the heads up so they can know when not to fly through the atmosphere or swim too many fathoms underwater? Is all that fancy technology he has not up for worldwide broadcasts or something? It can't be about not contaminating the experiment, or not wanting opposition, because he'd done that already by telling the X-Men.
Son, you are dumber than a bowl of mice.
And for all his rationalization and bluster, he goes back on his word with little to no explanation. His plan went wrong because Sinister had a secondary signal that was doing the opposite of what Wyndham intended. If he'll justify letting some people die in what he sees as the greater good, then you'd think he'd be okay with trying again without help from any old friends that might be supervillains, and not tell anyone about it in case they want to stop him.
And while some stories can run too long, many of the problems with this one may stem from it being way too short.
It didn't need to be one of those overhyped events that affects the status quo forever for 5 minutes, 7 offshoot tie-in one-shots and monthly titles usurped to connect it all, even though it kinda could qualify. But I digress. It could have actually benefited from at least 1 or 2 more issues where the elements are resolved, expanded upon, clear up how long the demutations were going on before the X-Men went to the satellite, and other questions get answered. An extra issue's worth where more fallout is seen, circumstances get better context in visual representation rather than only dialogue. Did Logan try seeing Sabretooth?
Sneak hug!
How did this field affect Apocalypse merged with Cyclops? Or was he somehow protected? Heck, maybe even a scene of an ex-mutant telling some bigots that he's no longer what they hated, but they still hate him regardless, to comment on how some prejudices run too deep. We could have seen Wyndham actually realize the wrong in his actions, the hurt he caused, or some error that was hidden to him by Sinister, all of which would have made this a meatier story. And the lessons, it's okay to be different, or you are who you are, not feel so second-hand.
They're good messages, and the concept is perfect for something like the X-Men, but this end result falls short of its potential. Maybe it would have worked as a separate miniseries rather than a cross-title tale. I'm the Angry Spork, and man, have I got issues.